I was, um, anyway, it's so cool to hear what everybody ends up taking away because it's always different than what you think. Um, all right, let's see. We are flipping to our next page on our notes where it says Northern Kingdom. Okay, so I've given you some important background info. It will be important as we're going through. It's the culture in which they are living and moving at the time. Okay, just like we'd have to explain what iPhones are to them, we have to learn what Molech was to them. You know, the struggle may seem silly to us, but it's like, they'd be like, why would you worship something that fits in your pocket? You know, why would you do that? And it's a good question for us to think about. So how this is structured from here on out is I split the prophets into different categories, okay? So we're going to look at the north first, like during that Civil War, you know? If you've studied the Civil War much in school, you know, you kind of study the two. Like you study what happened up north, what happened down south. We're going to do that one section at a time. So we're going to do the north, kind of give you an overview of their history briefly, and then we'll talk about the prophets tonight that have to do with the north, and then we'll go home. Okay? Tomorrow we'll do the south, and then there's a couple after that. So that's where we're headed, the Northern Kingdom. Don't you like all the skulls? There is a lot of skulls. So when I'm teaching this to my students, I have a chart, and at the top it says Northern Kings. There are 19 that we fill out one at a time. Have you ever read this section of the Bible where it's a whole bunch of kings and it like jumps back and forth and back and forth and back and forth from the southern king to the northern king, southern king? It's very confusing. So we study just the northern ones in a list, and we go one at a time. We storytell. There's a lot of crazy, crazy stories in this section. But as we go along, we also write down their heart condition, like their walk with God, each king, as you can best tell from the story. Often, you can read about it in 2 Kings, mainly the north, okay? Often the chronicler or the guy writing 2 Kings, the historian, when he would overview their life, he would say things like, they did evil in the eyes of the Lord, or they walked in the ways of their fathers, or they did what was right in the eyes of the Lord. Those are it's almost like a stamp over their whole life. Okay? And it would have their, a few key stories that they include about the person, but it's really this God's looking down and analyzing their life over and over and over and over. Okay, so when they do this list, there's an unfortunate reality when we do the north, okay? When we're filling out king number 1, okay? Seems Jeroboam, fill out Jeroboam. Okay, heart condition, evil, okay? We go to the next one. Okay, what's his heart condition? Evil. And we get down to probably king number 12, and we've written evil every single time, and they start looking at me like, are there any good ones? You know, they're like, please, let there be a good one. So check it out. This is the trajectory. I'm not going to give you all their names tonight, although it would be a really cool cross-training as well to do just in the Kings. I'm giving you just a brief overview here. So the first king of the north was this guy named Jeroboam, okay? It's confusing because he has a rhymey counterpart in the south named, anybody know? Rehoboam. Very good. Jeroboam, Rehoboam. I don't, when I get to heaven, if I remember, I'm going to ask the Lord, I'm like, there's so many confusing parts. And rhyming names. Why did you do that? Why didn't you pick very different names? Okay? So we got to differentiate here. Jeroboam was the first king of the north. And remember, God let the nation split. He let it as a judgment against Solomon's idolatry that's blossomed up like mushrooms, remember? And people are doing these atrocious things in his land. And he's like, no. Okay? When the split happens, God sends a prophet to Jeroboam, and he's like, hey, do you want a David dynasty? You can have one too. Remember the job description? Okay, and the prophet holds out the same job description as Deuteronomy 17. And he's like, if you do that, you too can have this covenant with God where he blesses you and you will be the next David. Okay? But Jeroboam, right off the bat, as the very first ruler of the north, makes a really ugly decision. Okay? When he's living up in the north, part of the complication for him as somebody taking over is they're all the people of God are supposed to go worship in one spot. Do you remember? What city are they supposed to go worship in? Jerusalem. Do you know? Was that in the north or the south? Do you remember on my little chart? Actually, I don't know if I had it on there. Do you remember what tribe Jerusalem is in the middle of? It's in the middle of Judah. Okay? It is David's place, okay? So the quandary that Jeroboam faces right off the bat is, oh my goodness, if I let the people do God's law, they're going to be traveling down south, and they're going to be looking all around, and they're going to be like, hey, why did we split off again? Why did we let this Jeroboam guy be our leader? We should go back and let David's family be our leader. And you know what we should do with Jeroboam? We should kill him. Okay, he was just dead, gone. Then we just forget about him, that we ever did this civil war thing, okay? So he does this political move where he actually creates a false religion. Does anybody know what religion he begins? He sets up 2 statues of something. They're gold. They've done it before. They were cows. That's right. They were baby cows. They were golden calves. Okay? Unlearnable. If anybody wants you to worship a golden cow, you should run the other way. This is history 101. No, this is a terrible idea. Okay, but that's what he does. He sets up 2 golden calves. Okay? One is up towards the top of the northern territory, and one is down, one off-ramp before you could keep going down to Jerusalem. It was the most convenient off-ramp you could get to keep you from going to Jerusalem. Okay, and he sets one up there, and he said, hey, Israel, because remember, the north is called Israel. Israel, hey, these are your gods that brought you out of Egypt. And he teaches them a false religion that's kind of intertwined with Israel's history, facts, but it's distorted. Okay. And he actually, that golden calf religion ends up being the downfall of about half of their history. Okay. King after king after king does what Jeroboam does. Okay. They follow the example that they saw before them. Okay, but I'm talking about there is some craziness in these stories, blood and guts galore. Okay, now I know I'm a little blonde woman, but when I'm telling these stories, the kids were like, oh, and I'm like, I know, right? And they're like, okay. I'm like, it's in the Bible. Anyway, there's all kinds of blood and gut stories of a king taking down the last king, just brutally, a king burning down a castle on himself because another one was coming to get him, okay? All kinds of major destruction, okay? Now, with God's covenant system, it's a big deal to him if you break his covenant. It's a big deal to my man if I break my covenant. Woo! I don't even want to think about it. It's like just not, it's so heartrending. I wouldn't even want to think about it. Okay, a true covenant commitment is a big deal when you break it. Okay, and when these people reject God's law and they embrace idolatry, God tells them that they will burn their houses to the ground, their dynasty, their family system. They will burn to the ground. FYI, if you choose idolatry, your legacy will burn to the ground. Okay, and they're like, and they still do it. And some of the stories entail physical fire. It's crazy. But so family after family, there's just turnover. There's no strong dynasty. Anyway, so then we have about halfway through, there's a guy that comes to power that's extremely scary. He has a very famous wife. Like, you don't want to name your daughter her name one day. Anybody want to take a guess? I heard it, Jezebel. Do you know her man's name? Jezebel and... So close. Oh, Jezebel and Ahab. Is this ringing a bell? Ahab. So let me tell you a story about Jezebel and Ahab real quick. When Ahab and Jezebel came to power, Jezebel was brought in from different territory, a very scary territory, actually. Okay, and she brings in her god system of Asherah and Baal. Okay, so before this, they were just really doing this golden calf thing that was basically like they would talk about Yahweh some, but they were doing this idolatrous thing. They had made up their own rules. It was kind of just like, kind of religion. When Ahab and Jezebel come to power, Jezebel lines up any prophet of the Lord that she can find, and she slaughters them. Slaughters. Like, there's one she hasn't gotten yet, and his name is Elijah. He thinks he's the only one left. If you imagine, like, all your youth leaders getting bloodily killed before your eyes, you're like, this is what she did to their people. Okay, where you're like, oh, okay. So they, in its place, they try and get rid of anybody referencing Yahweh for real. Okay, and in its place, they put in Baal and Asherah worship. Like, she finances it. Okay, so there's this famous story. You probably heard about it. We call it the Super Bowl of the gods when we do this story. But do you remember where the people are trying to, they're wavering between maybe Baal is God? Wait, maybe Yahweh is God? I don't know. Do you remember the story? Okay, so here are the prophets of Baal and Asherah that are both there. There is close to 900 of them, okay? That's a lot of people. Like, that's more than live in my town. That's a whole bunch of people all in one place. Over here, you got Elijah, because he thinks he's the only one. Okay, everybody else, the nation of the north that want to watch this, they're all standing there. Okay, it describes in this story what we have just seen about idolatry. Okay, they do the contest. Ahab agrees to it. Jezebel somehow isn't there. We don't know why she isn't there. Okay, but when they do this contest, what was going to prove that the God was authentic? What was going to be the sign? Yeah.
That there would be a fire,
Yes.
that the real God would cause a fire.
Yes, the real God would send fire. Not that hard. Okay? Even if I'm like this kind of God that like just half-hearted cares about you, I mean, come on, it's time to prove yourself. Let's bring some fire, you know? So if you read the story in 2 Kings, this group on the right, they start from early morning and they go till sunset, okay? From
morning to noon, they are doing that chanting we were talking about. Oh, Baal, answer us. Oh, Baal, answer us. But not Baal versus Molech, Okay, and they are just like going at it. And Elijah makes fun of them. He starts picking with them. Maybe we should talk louder. Not seeing any fire. He starts picking with them. So they're like, oh, we'll show Baal how serious we are. And it says that they took out their knives and their lances, which is like a blade, and they're cutting themselves. And in that story, it says, as was their custom. All that blood, it got spilled plenty of times. Like, this was a habit when you worshiped in that system. Okay? But at the end of the story, it says nobody answered. No, there was no response. Because Baal isn't a real God. Okay? He isn't a real God. That is the altar that has no fire. Okay? We time it in class when Elijah finally gets up in the evening and he gets up and he prays. Because all day, like 8 hours, they've been chanting. When Elijah gets up to pray, after he's doused the thing, like totally drowning the altar, he prays, and if you read it slow, it takes like 20 seconds. 20. You know the story. Okay? But this is it's a good insight into the whole idea of idolatry that we were just talking about. It also shows us a prophet, okay? Elijah and Elisha are speaking prophets, okay? They're going to be a little bit different than the ones that we talk about more at length. Those are called writing prophets. They have a book of the Bible themselves, okay, where it's like their sermons, so to speak, written out, okay? With Elijah or Elisha or different other ones, there's lots. There's lady prophets, by the way. They're prophetesses that are speaking prophetesses. And they have more narrative story behind them. And this is an example. The North has really cool stories with Elijah and Elisha during their very evil, dark days. God does really awesome miracles. Okay? That's something really cool to lean into. I'm going to go back just one real quick. So, once Ahab and Jezebel come to power about halfway through their history, the idolatry wreaks intense havoc. Anyway, we'll see it in some of the other prophets that we talk with them, or we write down their subject matter. But after 211 years, all evil kings, all evil, God finally is like, I'm done. See, God is slow to anger, but he does get angry. He has a long fuse, a lot longer than me. Okay. But his anger is so scary, way scarier than mine. People poke at him all the time when they take his name in vain, when they do things because he's going to forgive them anyway. The scary stuff. Okay, what's real powerful about this area of the Bible is you see God be a judge that holds people to account for what they have done. Kids will ask me, why are we studying about this? It's all evil. Why are we even taking the time? Okay, which is a great question. Why would God put so much of our book about how to teach us to follow him being all this evil stuff over and over and over? Can't we take the hint? It's not good. Okay, one day we were talking about that in class, and it just hit me like a wave of a big old stack of bricks. You know why? Oh, Lord. It's because he sees every evil thing
and writes it down. In the book of Revelation, he writes down, it says in his books, all of our deeds. So every evil thing that's ever been done to me, that I get all fiery, being like, oh, why aren't you going to do something, God? God's like, I saw it. I am very aware of that intense thing that happened. Okay? This is extremely comforting, like I was talking about this morning, to my kids that have had gross, awful abuse to them over long periods of time. It's like, it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter if their daddy's in jail for doing stuff to them. They want him to burn. You know what I'm saying? Like, they have that in their mind, and they're like, I hate my dad. I hate my dad. You know, and that just boils over. And they have to hear, man, God brings perfect justice to evil. He doesn't close his eyes. Sometimes when the news that I'm watching is like, oh, too dark and sad, I'm like, oh gosh, my day's been sad enough, and I change the channel. God never hides his eyes. He never is like, oh, let's just think about happy things. He's aware of deep atrocities in this world, genocides. One of these kings ripped open pregnant women as a power sign. That's horrendous, and God wrote it down. Okay? Our sins are not nothing to God. When he doesn't strike us down, or we're like shaking our fist in his face and he doesn't do anything, it's because he's slow to anger. His fuse is a lot longer than ours. But you don't want to do that to the Lord of the Bible. You may have a different concept of God in your mind, okay? But you don't want to do it to the God of the Bible. Okay, so after 211 years, we can just skip forward. Sorry. God had warned about this over and over and over. And we'll see it in some of the prophets. He tells the nation of the north, he's like, I am going to send someone in to exile you out of your home if you don't return to me, okay? And he's given them chance after chance after chance after chance. But eventually, this nation named Assyria, they come in, and they are the current world power of the day, the dominant, scary world power. And they come in and do horrible psychological warfare to the people of the north, okay? So it's pretty weird to cartoon about this, but you got a person on a stake. They're impaled. Okay, they would burn everything to the ground. And does anybody want to guess what this is? Heads, okay? Piled up heads. If you study just about the Assyrian Empire, just straight up in history class, you will learn about their fear tactic. It's very fascinating teaching about this during our ISIS stuff that we've encountered, if you've watched the news some, or if you ever saw videos about that, because it's very similar. After one of their attacks one time, I remember in France, ISIS I'm talking about now, in France, the people, if you remember, maybe adults, maybe you guys remember students, but remember there was a cartoonist in France that had drawn something of Muhammad, and ISIS came in and beheaded the cartoonist in his office. Do you remember this? Anyway, the next day, the people of France stormed the streets protesting, and there's a really famous sign that they hold up. It says, "Not afraid." Not afraid, okay? Now, it was powerful because ISIS, if you've ever seen any of their videos, they wear black wraps around their face, and they burn people alive in their videos. They send it to news stations hoping that it will cause fear and panic in their enemies. Most news stations refuse to show it, okay? That fear tactic, though, that the people were protesting in France, it showed, hey, I see what you're doing, and we're not afraid, okay? Fear has a, paralyzing effect, okay? It keeps you from, They would even, at times, I couldn't think of how to draw those, okay? But the Assyrians were known for skinning people alive, okay? So if I'm standing there and I've just seen that happen next to me, okay, I'm going to do what they say because I'm like, oh, like the pain, the physical, you know what I'm saying? Fear has an incredible power. And that was under the Assyrian Empire. That was their thing, okay? They would just use violence against people as, hey, now everyone else who is alive, they will obey us, okay? We can do what we want. So the idea of exile, if you remember from World War II history, the Nazis took Jewish people from in Germany or other European nations, and they took them out of their homes, and they made them go other places by train. Have you remember learning about this in history class? This is very similar, just without the train. So you're walking, okay? They would round people up that they hadn't killed, and they would make them go all over their empire wherever was convenient for them, okay? They would normally take them to a place that they were unfamiliar with the culture and the climate, so that they wouldn't even know how to grow food or whatnot. So it would be like they would be under subjection even more so, okay? They wouldn't have the energy to rebel. Okay, so over this nation, bless. This is where we had the book of Amos. So if you'd like to take your Bible and finally turn to what a book of the Bible, you guys have just had to take my word for it. Look at Amos. He looks like somebody where I live. We have some farmers. Amos was a prophet after Elijah and Elisha. He was after Ahab, okay? He was under a king named Jeroboam II. He wasn't the original golden calf guy. He was a second one, named after him. So you know he's not too awesome, okay? He's very similar, the king at the time. But God, all along through the northern kingdom, when he would be calling people to himself, he would make their life difficult to get them to wake up to, hey, what you're doing when you're going down to Asher's house and you're doing all this instant gratification prostitution. Don't do that. So you know what? I'm going to dry up your money so you don't have any money to go do that. And they'd be like, where's all my money? God, why didn't you give me money? And it's like, wait, what? Now you talk to me? Okay, so things like that occurred all through the north where God calls them to himself. But under Jeroboam II, one of the methods God had used to try and wake them up to return to himself was he lets a people group, a different one than the Assyrians, kind of beat up and bully on them. Okay, where they would come raid sometimes, and it was getting pretty rough. Certain areas of their land have been taken over, not totally, but things valuable to them. And God looked down on his people, and oh man, I know how this feels. I have kids that have been in the dorm that are in rebellion, and I love them very much. And when I look at their life, it's like, oh, I want good things for you, but when you have the good things, you just use it on the bad things. But when I give you the good thing, it's like, I love, but I can't. It's very big tension, okay? When God looked down on his people with this oppressive other people group kind of raiding them, he's like, you know what? I have compassion on them. Okay, and he picks up Jeroboam II, who's an evil guy, doesn't care about God at all, and he uses him as a military leader to get back that land. Okay, when that happens, the north is like, we're at peace again. And when they get back all that land, it brings in the monies. Okay, so under Amos, the audience that we are specifically thinking about right now are wealthy people that are like, oh, everything's going good. And I kind of got God in my pocket. Like, what's he going to do? Things are going good. Every prophet that we're going to specifically look at now, if you look on your notes here, you've got a little box. And when we have a prophet that's got his little name tag underneath it, you feel free to draw that picture in your box. It's like the profile photo, like I was talking about this morning, the one that kind of embodies what that prophet's ministry is about. So here's ours for Amos. Eventually, they're going to be more stick people-y. I was trying to show specifically that he is a farmer. So you can just draw a little piece of wheat coming out or whatever. I know they didn't wear overalls back then, but I was trying to show that he was a farmer. So each prophet, when you draw the little profile photo, you also have to kind of listen up for what the audience is like at the time. Okay, because over all the prophets, it's like if I gave you an intense sit-down talk, and then you an intense sit-down talk, and then you an intense sit-down talk, and I knew you really well. All of those messages don't interchange, okay? Like what Kristen needs to hear is different than what Ash needs to hear, right? So when we're listening and learning about these, they're not all going to be for Ethan. But one or two are probably going to be for Ethan, because that's how the Holy Spirit works it out. Okay? If you're in a hard-hearted, rebellious place, there's a certain prophet talking about hard-hearted rebellion. Okay? Amos, right now, he's talking to people that have lots of money, like an overflowing amount. Okay? And what? Things are, we'll look at it. So Amos, the actual man, it starts in chapter 1. It just sort of describes it right up in the front. We're not going to read through it, but just if you're looking, that's where it is. It describes him actually being from the south. God calls to him to be a prophet to the north. So in a sense, he's sort of a missionary to the north. If you imagine the Civil War, there's tension lines when you cross. There's all kinds of loyalty questions or whatnot, That's what God asked him to do. He asked his farmer self to actually go to the capital of the north, which is Samaria. Okay, that city gets said a lot, Samaria. So he's kind of like a country dude being asked to go to big city people. Okay, and this is just a cool point for even all of us adults or you at your school. God doesn't just use a carbon copy of you to minister to a carbon copy of you. Okay? He can cross, it's just funny. He will use people that you're like, oh, we're not anything alike, but God spoke through them to me. She was 86, and she pulled me aside in the, what do you guys call it, the courtyard? Is that what you guys call it? The courtyard of your church? She pulled me aside, and, God can use people that are totally different than you to speak into your life, and he can use you to speak to people that are totally different from you. You don't just have to look like them, be like them for God to use you. Okay, so the crowd that Amos preaches to, they're city people, and they are religious, so you see them in the church there. But what Amos brings up real frequently is they're coming to church, they're doing the churchy outward thing, but the hidden character of what is actually going on in the church people is really dark and scary. Okay? In theirs, it's murder, greed, lies. They're doing horrible oppression to people. But they are lifting their hands and singing to Yahweh when they decide to go to Yahweh's house, not the Golden Calf Place or Baal's. You know, like when they make their Sunday stop and they decide to actually go to that church. Okay, I remember talking with my students. I was having a discussion with them. I'm like, have you guys ever seen people be strikingly hypocritical in a church circle or a church event or something? And this one girl, do you guys do D Now here? Do you know what a D Now is? Disciple Now? They what? Okay. Is it? Yeah, it's a great. So it's like, I don't know what would be the equivalent. Like some kind of big youth conference. I don't know. Okay. Yes, yeah. They have like youthy worship. There's a bunch of churches all together. So you can like meet people. Anyways, this girl was talking to me about a D Now that her youth group had gone to. And it was in a town just a little bit over. And she was like, yeah, so we did the Saturday session. And this guy went out to a party that night instead of staying, like you stayed the night with certain host families or whatever. And then he came to Sunday morning breakfast bragging about the party that he went to the night before, that he had had sex with 2 girls. And then he proceeded to walk right into worship, praising, singing. And when she told me, I was like, okay, first of all, he's probably full of crap, okay? So you can just comfort your heart with that. Second of all, it's really atrocious that he would be that hard-hearted. Ah! These people are that way. In fact, God is so frustrated that we'll see him actually use the word hate, okay? But first, let's look at one other element of their character here. They're actually very aggressively taking advantage of people that are in poverty, okay? And it's interesting. It was a situation where, like, the rich were getting intensely richer and the poor were getting much, much poorer based off of unfair fines. Have you guys ever seen those title loan places that are kind of dotted in cities? You know what I'm talking about? Business people know what I'm talking about. Oh, I've had friends and people that I know that have gone to get loans from those places. Do you know the percentage interest that they charge?
It can go from like 25 to 80%.
I have heard higher than that. It's basically like selling your soul. Okay, that's pretty much what it's like. Like, if you get $1,000, you can walk out paying $9,000. It is like, but they don't say that up front. Where is it written? The fine print that you don't read and you sign. And you have your money because you need it now. You're welcome. You're going to pay me $9,000. You know what I mean? And they're mostly in Mississippi. We have a lot of poor towns. And those places are like sharks. They feed off of it. And it creates this system of awfulness. Okay? Some of the people that run those places are church-going people. Okay? And God's like, I care about how you do business. I care about it. Okay? So in Amos, we see our business and our sexuality better be affected by our religion. Okay? It's very important to God. So let's flip actually to chapter 5, and let's see how important it actually is to him. Chapter 5, verse 21. Let's see. I think we're going to go to the verse here. 5:21 and following. If you have your pens, I would underline this. I despise your feasts. I take no delight in your solemn assemblies. Even though you offer me your burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. And in the peace offerings of your fatted animals, I will not look upon them. Take away from me the noise of your songs. To the melody of your harps, I will not listen. It's crazy. So I love technology for stuff like this. Like, I just think it's awesome. I think it's interesting to me how I also do music. Sometimes friends that I know that do music, they have little tracks that they play, just on the background of the band or whatever. And it's so like seamless and everything's like a set. And it's them in the best way glorifying God by being a good worship leader, okay? But sometimes, okay, I wish we would pull the plug and be like, what are our hearts like when we're walking in right now? Does God like our song? How have we lived this week? Because the songs that really bring him pleasure are the ones that have the life behind it, not just they sounded good, Man, it's crazy. He says, I hate. I don't even want to hear you sing. Okay, it's funny, though, because if you think about the kid that, is bragging about going to this conference and doing that stuff, when he's raising his hands, you don't see God being like, I hate it. You just see silence. You're like, maybe God doesn't care. This is very important, okay? Your spiritual conscience, compass, however you want to describe it, how you know something is right or wrong, needs to come from this book right here, okay? So like that girl telling me about that story, and she looks over and it seems like he gets away with it. Maybe God doesn't care. Maybe it's just, I ask for forgiveness and it's fine. It's like, oh no. Don't chalk up God's long anger fuse to he's okay. Okay? Don't do that. Okay? For your own life's sake. So instead of these songs that God hates, or these offerings, check it out. Verse 24. But let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. I love the beach so much. And I'm with people that love the beach. This makes me so happy. In Mississippi, it's hit or miss, when you go out in the waves and they're so strong that you get bowled over. Like, you physically cannot stand in them. That's what I was trying to draw. When you live by God's law in a society that does not, okay? I want you to hear from God tonight that your life is like that powerful wave. Boom! When you love God back and you follow him, it pleases him. Okay? You swing open that floodgate of selfishness, just thinking about how to do what you want to do and do religion like you want to do and get from people what you want. If you no, I'm going to live for God. I'm going to do what he says. I'm going to anchor myself in God's word. Your life is like a mighty flood of justice. It's so humbling to talk about me and my husband's work at French camp. Okay? That is not the only place that the Lord works, and I love when I travel to meet people like your youth leaders that are doing similar things. The trickle-down effect of their obedience has impact beyond what they know. Okay? You can grow up and do that, my sweet people. The Lord's standard is not crushingly hard. He wants to make you somebody awesome, like that wave. Okay? Okay, what is our time? 8:45? Is that what our break was? Or is it 9? Okay, so this is where we're going to leave off with Amos, and we will pick up our next one after our little break. There's a funny quote I heard about doing long talks. You want to hear it? We were sitting in a very long session, and the guy said, when the butt gets numb, the brain gets dumb. So please, go get some blood flow. Go.